Tycoon deserts wife for a chance to travel the world. Later learns she's raising his secret trio. It was a quiet evening in Seoul. The kind of evening where the city lights flickered like stars scattered across the earth, and the air was laced with the scent of rain that had fallen just hours before. In a sleek penthouse far above the crowded streets, a woman stood alone by the window, her hands gently resting on the cool glass. She wore a soft cream sweater and held a mug of jasmine tea, long since gone cold. Her name was Eun-ji, and although the world outside bustled with life, inside her heart, everything was still, too still. The silence of that home had become normal. No laughter, no music. Just silence and the ticking of the expensive clock that seemed to count down not the hours, but the slow erosion of something once beautiful. Her gaze drifted across the city, eyes tired yet searching, and when the front door opened with a soft click, she didn't turn around. She already knew the footsteps. She knew their rhythm, how they slowed when he was deep in thought, how they sped up when he was anxious. These were the hurried, restless steps of a man who didn't want to stay. Eun-ji, came his voice, Daniel, cold even when soft, controlled, as if affection were something to be rationed. She turned slowly, heart tightening just at the sight of him. He looked like he always did, sharp suit, sleek hair, not a wrinkle in sight. He looked like a magazine cover. But Eun-ji didn't see the image. She saw the man beneath it, the man who used to sleep beside her with his head in her lap, telling her about impossible dreams. He hesitated, then looked around the apartment as if it were a stranger's place. "We need to talk," he said, his voice clipped, businesslike. Eun-ji placed the mug on the table, the sound of ceramic against glass cutting through the air like a blade. "Talk?" she repeated, eyes meeting his. "After weeks of silence, now you want to talk?" Daniel ran a hand through his hair, a rare crack in his polished exterior. "This isn't working. You know it." Her breath caught. She knew the moment was coming, but knowing didn't soften the blow. "So you've decided," she whispered. He nodded, and for a second, just a second, his eyes flickered with something close to guilt. But it was buried too fast. "I need to leave. Not just here. I need to go. Travel. Explore. Find something that makes me feel alive again." "Alive?" she asked, her voice breaking just slightly. "And what have I been this whole time, Daniel? Dead weight. That's not what Eun-ji, I'm not made for this. For sitting still. For being someone's husband." She looked at him then, really looked, searching for the man she fell in love with. "Then why did you marry me?" Her voice cracked, and the pain behind it was too raw to hide. He looked away. "I thought I could do it," he said quietly. "I thought I could be that man. But every day, I feel like I'm losing who I am. And I can't live like that." She stepped closer, tears filling her eyes but refusing to fall. "Do you know what I gave up for this life with you? Do you know how many times I waited for you to come home, to ask how I was, to just see me? I never asked you to give anything up," he snapped, more harshly than he intended. The silence that followed was louder than anything else. She flinched but held her ground. "And that's exactly the problem, isn't it?" Daniel exhaled sharply, walking to the kitchen counter and bracing himself against it. He couldn't look at her. "I'm leaving next week. I've already made the arrangements." Her knees almost buckled, but she held herself upright. "Where will you go?" "Everywhere," he said with a bitter smile. "Everywhere I've never been." There was a long silence. Eun-ji crossed her arms, not to protect herself from him, but from the emptiness starting to spread inside her. "So that's it? After everything, you just walk away?" Daniel finally turned to her, and his eyes met hers with something unreadable. "I don't expect you to understand. I don't," she said, stepping back. "But I hope one day, when you're staring at some breathtaking view or dancing in the streets of some foreign place, I hope a part of you remembers that you left someone behind who would have walked through the world with you. If only you'd asked." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "I would have gone anywhere with you, Daniel." He looked away. She took a deep breath and wiped her tears with trembling fingers. "You can leave, But don't come back just because you're lost. I'm not your home anymore." Daniel hesitated, as if her words pierced deeper than he expected. But he nodded. "I won't make any promises I can't keep." And then he was gone. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Eun-ji stood still for a long time, the tears finally falling. The sound of the rain returned, tapping softly against the windows. In that moment, everything shattered. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly, like a vase slipping from trembling hands. A soft crash, 1,000 silent pieces. She walked to the couch and sat, hugging herself, trying to hold together what he had just torn apart. Outside, the world moved on. But inside that room, time froze. And somewhere, in the deepest part of her heart, something whispered, "He'll regret this. One day he will." But tonight, that thought offered no comfort. Only silence, and the sound of her own breathing. Você diz. Certo? Agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoco. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o ChatGPT diz. The days that followed passed, like a blur of gray. Eun-ji moved through the apartment as if in a dream she couldn't wake from. The mornings were the worst. She would open her eyes to silence, reach out instinctively to the other side of the bed, only to touch cold sheets. The scent of him lingered on his pillow, faint now, but still there. It clung to her like a ghost she didn't want to chase away. She went through the motions, brushing her hair, preparing simple meals she barely touched, folding the laundry though there was hardly anything left to wash. The once shared home now felt cavernous, every corner whispering reminders of what was lost. Sometimes she'd stand by the full-length window where they used to watch the stars, her fingertips pressed to the glass. She remembered his voice telling her how one day he wanted to wake up in a different country every week. She had smiled back then, admiring his dreams, believing that somehow she'd be part of them. But now, that same dream had swallowed her whole and spit her out alone. It was nearly 2 weeks after Daniel left when it happened. She had been feeling off, fatigued, lightheaded. She thought maybe it was the stress, the heartbreak, the countless nights spent crying into her pillow. But then, one morning, while standing at the sink, the smell of the coffee grounds made her stomach churn violently. She barely made it to the bathroom in time. After rinsing her mouth, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her skin was pale, her eyes tired and red-rimmed. And then a sudden, terrifying thought struck her. No, it can't be. She whispered it aloud, as if saying it would make it less true. The next hour was a frantic rush to the pharmacy, then back home with trembling hands clutching a small white bag. She stared at the test for long minutes, afraid to take it, afraid not to. Finally, she entered the bathroom and closed the door behind her. 10 minutes later, she sat on the tiled floor, holding the test in her hands, her back pressed to the cold wall. 2 lines. Positive. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Tears began to spill, not the heavy sobs of grief but the silent kind, the kind that pour from the soul. She curled her knees to her chest, the pregnancy test still clutched in one hand. She wasn't crying just from fear or shock. She cried for the child or children who would never know the warmth of their father's arms. She cried for the dreams they'd never shared. She cried because this should have been a moment of joy, not devastation. That evening, she tried to call him. Just once. She sat on the edge of the bed, the phone pressed to her ear, listening to it ring, over and over, until finally it clicked to voicemail. You've reached Daniel Kim. I'm currently out of the country. Leave a message. She didn't. She hung up and placed the phone on the nightstand. She wouldn't call again. A week passed, then 2. And slowly, Eun-ji began to change. She started eating better, not for herself, but for the life growing inside her. She visited the doctor, hands trembling as the sonogram flickered to life on the screen. The technician gasped softly. "Miss Eun-ji, you're not carrying just one baby." Her breath caught. "There are 3 heartbeats. You're having triplets." She blinked, unable to speak. Her eyes welled again. But this time her tears held something more. Not just grief, not just fear, but awe, wonder, and the dawning weight of responsibility. That night, she sat at the little desk in the corner of her room, opening an old journal. She hadn't written in it in years, but tonight, she needed it. "Dear babies," she wrote, her handwriting shaky. "I didn't plan for you. I didn't even know I needed you. But now that I know you're here, I swear I will protect you. I don't know how I'll do it. I'm scared. I'm alone. But I will find a way. I promise you that." She placed her hand gently over her belly, still flat and silent. "I'm all you have," she whispered, "and I'll make sure that's enough." The next months weren't easy. Her body changed rapidly. The nausea, the fatigue, the loneliness, it all intensified. She had to quit her part-time job at the bookstore. Bills piled up. The city grew too expensive, too suffocating. So she packed a single suitcase, rented a moving truck, and relocated to a small village outside of Seoul. There, in a humble cottage with creaky floors and wind that whistled through the windows, she began her new life. The villagers were kind. Curious, yes, but kind. She found work teaching basic Korean and reading to children. It wasn't much, but it was enough for rent and food. Sometimes she sold handmade crafts, sewing little dolls and embroidery hoops late into the night. Her belly grew, and with it, so did her strength. She stopped thinking about Daniel. At least she told herself she did. But some nights, when the wind howled and the house was too quiet, she'd reach for the empty side of the bed. Just once. Just to remember what it had felt like to be held. When the babies finally arrived, it was during the first snowfall of the year. 3 perfect, screaming little souls. 2 boys and a girl. She named them Miho, Jisoo, and Hannah. She held them to her chest, exhausted, trembling, but smiling for the first time in what felt like forever. "You don't need to know his name," she whispered to them, "because I'll give you all the love he never could." In the years that followed, she became mother and father, protector and provider, teacher and friend. Her children grew strong, happy, bright. They had her eyes and his smile. And every time she saw it, her heart twisted. But she never let the pain last long. She was their world now. One night, when the kids were 3, little Hannah climbed into her lap, her big curious eyes looking up. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" Eun-ji paused. Her heart clenched. She looked into her daughter's innocent face and forced a gentle smile. "He's traveling," she said softly. "He wanted to see the world. Will he come back?" Eun-ji hesitated. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But even if he doesn't, we're okay. Aren't we?" Hannah nodded, wrapping her tiny arms around her mother's neck. "I love you, Mommy." And every night, when the house finally quieted and the only sound left was the low crackling of the fire, Eun-ji would feel it. The ache of exhaustion in her body, and the ache of something else, deeper, older, untouched. But life did not wait for her aching. The children were growing. Their laughter filled the walls like sunlight, and slowly, slowly, she began to smile without guilt again. Until one morning, everything changed. It was early spring. The snow had started to melt, revealing the soft brown of the earth beneath. Eun-ji had taken the children into town for groceries, her arms heavy with bags and her eyes distracted as she reminded Miho not to run too far ahead. Then she heard a voice behind her. "Eun-ji." She froze. The sound of it was faint, yet unmistakable. It was a name spoken like a question, full of disbelief. Slowly, cautiously, she turned. And there he was, Daniel. He looked different, not in the way people age, but in the way people change. His skin was tanned from sun she hadn't seen. His hair longer, more relaxed, like he had stopped caring so much about looking perfect. But his eyes, they were the same, restless, intelligent, haunted. She blinked, wondering if she was imagining him. Maybe the years had made her mind cruel. Maybe she'd conjured him out of some hidden loneliness she never dared admit to herself. "Daniel," she said flatly. His lips parted, unsure whether to smile or cry. "You're here. I didn't think, I never thought I'd see you again." She nodded, her hands tightening around the grocery bags. She didn't trust herself to say anything else. Then his eyes shifted to the 3 small children standing nearby, watching curiously. Miho, Jisoo, Hannah, all frozen in place, unsure who the stranger was who had made their mother turn to stone. Daniel's gaze locked on their faces, and something inside him broke. His breath caught. The resemblance was undeniable. The boys had his sharp jawline, his deep brown eyes. Hannah's smile, her quiet, observant gaze, was his mother's. He took a step forward, then another. "Who?" Eun-ji didn't answer. She simply stepped in front of them, protective, as if shielding them from a storm that had returned too late. "They're mine," she said quietly. He stared at her, then back at them, then back again. "All 3? He asked, almost in a whisper. She nodded. He opened his mouth, closed it. His entire body sagged like someone had punched the wind out of him. "Why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes flared. The years of pain, silence, and sacrifice boiled up so quickly it made her hands tremble. "I did," she snapped. "I called. Once. You ignored it. After that, I didn't see the point." Daniel looked stunned, like her words slapped him harder than any hand could. I didn't know. I was in Argentina. I didn't check my voicemail for weeks. I thought you were just angry. I didn't think it was. I never imagined." She looked away, blinking fast. "Well, now you know." He turned to the children again, as if trying to memorize them all in a second he knew would never be enough. "How old are they?" he asked, his voice breaking. 4. They'll be 5 in November." His eyes closed. "God." The silence between them grew thick, the air too heavy with everything that hadn't been said for years. Finally, Eun-ji sighed. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" He looked at her, uncertain. "I came back. For business. I wanted to launch a new branch of the company near the rural schools. We're investing in tech for underdeveloped regions." He swallowed hard. "I never thought you'd be here. I didn't even know you'd left Seoul." She shook her head, letting out a dry laugh. "Of course you didn't. You never looked back." He stepped forward again, lowering his voice. "Eun-ji, I didn't come back for this. But now that I'm here, I can't just walk away. I have kids. I have children. I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "You left me with nothing, Daniel. No money, no home, no goodbye. You said you needed to feel alive, and you killed everything that made me feel like I was." He looked at the ground, ashamed. The children pulled at her coat. "Mommy, who is that man?" She knelt, brushing their hair back gently, eyes glistening. "He's..." She paused, then looked at Daniel. "He's someone I used to know." Hannah blinked at him, tilting her head. "Do we know him too?" Eun-ji gave a small smile, heartbreak written all over it. "Not yet." Daniel's hands trembled at his sides. He took a small step closer. Can I talk to them?" Eun-ji didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at her children, her world, the 3 lives she had built from nothing. And then, with her voice steady but cold, she said, "They're not ready." He nodded slowly, pain tightening his jaw. "I understand." But as she turned to walk away, their 3 little hands tucked in hers, he called out one last time. "Eun-ji." She stopped. "When I left, I thought I was chasing something important, something life-changing. But standing here, seeing them, I realized what I gave up." She didn't turn around. "You didn't give it up," she said softly. "You threw it away." And then she walked away. Daniel stood there for a long time after they disappeared from view. The sounds of the village life moved on around him. Bicycles, dogs barking, children laughing in the distance. "Mom," he whispered as she leaned in to kiss his forehead. She paused. Yes, sweetheart. Was that man really our dad? Her heart dropped. She hesitated, smoothing his hair with trembling fingers. Why do you ask? Because he looked at us like he knew us, but also like he didn't, and his eyes looked sad. Jisoo turned in his bed, his voice sleepy and small. Are we gonna see him again? Eunji didn't have an answer. Not yet. She kissed them both again and whispered, "Close your eyes. Okay? Mommy's here." But when she left the room and pulled the door shut, her own eyes brimmed with tears. She slid to the floor in the hallway, back against the wall, her arms wrapped around herself. Why now? Why after everything? She had buried that chapter, sealed it shut. Now the wound had reopened, and the ache was so much deeper because she wasn't the only one who would feel it. She stayed there for a long time, long enough for the fire to burn low, long enough for the night air to chill her skin. Then came the knock. She didn't move at first. Maybe she imagined it. Maybe it was the wind. But it came again, gentle, hesitant. She stood, heart pounding. Her hands trembled as she opened the door. There he was, Daniel, standing on her porch, holding nothing but the weight of his regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I know I shouldn't have come this late." She didn't speak. Her eyes studied him carefully, warily. He stepped back slightly. I can't sleep. Not after seeing them." Still, she said nothing. But she didn't close the door either. Daniel exhaled, his breath visible in the cool night air. "I've been all over the world," he said. "I've seen mountains that touch the sky, oceans so wide they make you feel like a speck. I've sat under stars in the middle of nowhere and thought I understood what peace was." His voice cracked. "But I've never felt what I felt today, looking at them, realizing they're mine, that I missed everything." A flicker of something, hurt, anger, compassion, passed through her eyes. "You left," she said finally, her voice quiet and sharp. "You chose to leave." "I know," he whispered, "and I will regret that for the rest of my life." She crossed her arms. "Then why are you here, Daniel? What do you want? Forgiveness? A second chance?" He looked down. "No, I know I don't deserve that. I need to do something. I can't erase what I did. But maybe I can be useful. I can help. Financially. Or..." "No," she cut him off. "This isn't about money." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to buy anything. I want to know them, even if they don't know me. Even if you never let me be in their lives. I want to see them grow. I want to watch from a distance if that's all I'm allowed." Her jaw tightened. "You don't get to watch like a stranger at a window," she said. "They're not a movie. They're not some emotional closure for your world tour." He flinched at that. "I never stopped thinking about you," he murmured. "But I was too proud, too scared of what I'd given up. And now I see it. I gave up everything that mattered." Eunji closed her eyes, breathing through the flood of feelings inside her. Pain, fury, grief, and beneath it all, the flicker of something else. Something she didn't want to name. "I don't know what to do with you," she whispered. Daniel stepped closer, slowly. "Let me prove who I am now. Not to you, to them. I don't know if I trust you with their hearts," she said, her voice beginning to shake. He looked at her, his eyes full of sorrow and humility. "Then start with their names." She hesitated, then spoke slowly, like each word cost her something. "Miho, Jisoo, Hannah." He smiled, just barely, the kind of smile that breaks your heart. "They're beautiful," he said. "I know." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Eunji looked away, her voice hollow. "They've asked about you every night since." He blinked. "They have." She nodded. "But I told them the truth, that you left, that you didn't come back, that I didn't know if you ever would." "I'm here now," he whispered. "I can't change what I did, but please, don't shut me out completely." Eunji studied him for a long time. Then finally, she stepped aside, just slightly. "I'm not inviting you in," she said firmly. "But I'm not closing the door either." Daniel nodded, his eyes full of understanding and hope. "Good night, Daniel," she said quietly, before gently closing the door between them. But she leaned her forehead against the wood, heart racing. She hadn't slept. She kept replaying the conversation, the knock at the door, the look on Daniel's face when she said their names. Miho, Jisoo, Hannah. It echoed in her chest like a memory that had only just now found its place. "Mama?" came a small voice behind her. She turned and saw Hannah rubbing her eyes, her messy hair falling into her face. "Good morning, baby," Eunji said softly, setting the spoon down and kneeling to her daughter's level. "Did you sleep well?" Hannah nodded and leaned her head into her mother's shoulder. "Was that man still outside?" she mumbled. Eunji froze. Hannah looked up, curious. "I saw him from the window. He was standing there for a long time." Eunji swallowed the knot in her throat. "No," she whispered. "He left after I closed the door. Is he coming back?" "I don't know." There was a pause, and then Hannah placed her tiny hand on her mother's cheek, her eyes impossibly wise for her age. "Did he make you cry?" Eunji's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. She just nodded. Hannah leaned in and kissed her mother's forehead. "Then I don't like him yet." Eunji let out a small, broken laugh and pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her tightly, breathing in the scent of her hair. By mid-morning, all three children were awake, filling the cottage with noise and movement. Miho was already asking for stories, and Jisoo was humming the melody to a song he'd made up about dragons and jam. Eunji tried to hold onto the rhythm of the day, the simplicity, the routine, but that peace shattered with the sound of another knock. It was softer this time, more cautious. Eunji opened the door with a heavy heart. Daniel stood there again, holding a box. "I brought something," he said, his voice uncertain. "For them." Her gaze moved to the box. Books, small toys, coloring sets, a few handmade wooden puzzles. "I wasn't sure what they liked," he added quickly. "I remembered you saying once that you wanted your children to grow up with imagination." She didn't answer right away, just stared. "I told you not to come back so soon," she said quietly. "I know," he said, lowering his eyes, "but I couldn't stay away. You don't get to come in and fix things with coloring books. I'm not trying to fix anything. I just wanted to give them something real, something small." She hesitated, then sighed. "They're outside, playing in the garden." He lit up slightly. "May I just watch? From the fence? I won't speak to them. I promise." Eunji nodded once, silently. Daniel walked around the side of the cottage, where the little wooden fence surrounded the patch of grass that served as the children's world. They were chasing each other in circles, squealing and laughing. Jisoo had a paper crown on his head. Miho was pretending to be a dinosaur. Hannah sat beneath the plum tree, braiding grass. Daniel stood there, gripping the fence with both hands, his knuckles white. He watched as Jisoo tripped and scraped his knee. Eunji moved quickly from the porch, kneeling beside him, whispering words of comfort as she cleaned the wound. Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, watching her do the thing he'd never done, comfort his child. After a while, Miho looked toward the fence. His gaze met Daniel's. They stared at each other for a long moment. Daniel's lips parted, but Miho turned and ran back to his siblings without a word. Eunji walked over to the fence, her arms crossed. "You see?" she said. "They're not ready." "I know," Daniel said quietly, "but I needed to see them again. I don't care how long it takes. I'll wait." Eunji's eyes narrowed. "Why now, Daniel? Why did you come back to Korea at all?" He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Because I realized something was missing. No matter where I went, no matter what I built, I felt empty, like I'd left something behind that no passport could replace." She said nothing. "I used to think freedom meant being untied, but it turns out I was just floating, alone." She looked at him. "And what am I supposed to do with this confession? You left me with 3 children and no explanation." "I didn't know," he whispered. "But even if I had, I was too selfish to face it. Unji blinked, hard. Her voice trembled. You missed everything. Their first words, their first steps, their first fevers, their first birthdays. You weren't there when Hannah had trouble breathing at 2 in the morning. You weren't there when Miho thought thunder would swallow the house. You weren't there when Jisoo asked why other kids had dads and they didn't. Daniel's face crumpled. I can never get that time back, he said. I know that. I hate myself for it. Good, she said coldly. You should. He didn't defend himself, just nodded. Do they even deserve to know you now? She asked. I don't know, he said honestly, but I'd like to earn the chance. She looked away, blinking fast. You don't get to earn fatherhood like it's a prize. I'm not trying to be their hero, he said. I just want to be there, even if it's in the background. Even if they only call me that man at the fence. Unji's jaw clenched. Then, finally, she said, You can come tomorrow, but you don't speak to them. You don't bring gifts. You sit and you watch. And maybe, if they ask who you are, I'll tell them the truth. He looked at her, stunned. Thank you. Don't thank me, she said. Thank them. They're the ones who'll decide what kind of man you get to be. She turned back toward the cottage. And inside the garden, the children played as they always had. Sometimes giggling, sometimes arguing over sticks or stones, sometimes pretending the plum tree was a castle. At first, they barely noticed the man watching them. But as the week passed, they started to glance his way more often. Curiosity bloomed in their eyes like spring flowers. Unji observed it all from the porch. One morning, as she was hanging laundry under the pale sunlight, Miho approached her with his hands behind his back. Mom, he said, his voice serious. Is that man at the fence still there? She nodded, slowly pinning a small shirt to the line. Why? He wants to see you, she said quietly. He wants to know you. Miho frowned. Is he my dad? Unji's hands stilled. Yes, she said softly. He is. Miho looked down at his shoes. He looks sad. She crouched beside him, gently touching his chin. He is. Because he left us? Yes. The boy tilted his head. Can people come back after they leave like that? She didn't know how to answer. Not fully. So she gave him the only honest truth she had. Sometimes they try, but it doesn't mean we have to let them in. Miho seemed to accept that. He ran off again, calling to his siblings. That same afternoon, as the sun dipped toward the horizon and the sky turned golden, Daniel sat just outside the fence again, a notebook in his lap. He was sketching something Unji never knew he did. His hand moved slowly, capturing the scene in front of him. Hannah beneath the tree, Jisoo crouched with a beetle in his palm, Miho tossing pebbles into a tin bucket. He hadn't noticed Unji approaching. You draw? She asked, her voice breaking the soft rustle of wind through the grass. He startled, then closed the notebook instinctively. Not really, just lately. I don't know why. Maybe it makes me feel closer to them. She looked at the notebook. May I? He hesitated, then handed it to her. The pages were filled with rough sketches. Imperfect, messy, full of emotion. Their tiny faces captured mid-laughter. A close-up of Miho's furrowed brow. Hannah asleep in the grass. Jisoo sticking his tongue out in concentration. And at the bottom of one page, a portrait of her, alone on the porch, watching them, a sadness in her expression that pierced even through pencil. She held the notebook for a long moment before returning it to him. You noticed everything, but you were never there, she murmured. I know, he whispered. Her eyes met his, searching. What do you want, Daniel? Truly. He looked up, his voice raw. I want to earn the right to hear them laugh, to pick them up when they fall, to bring them medicine when they're sick. I don't want to watch anymore. I want to be present. You can't walk back into a life and expect the door to still be open. I don't expect that, he said. I just want to build something, even if it's small, even if it takes years. Her eyes softened, but the edge never left her voice. They're already building their lives. You don't get to tear down what they know just because you regret leaving. I don't want to tear anything down. I want to add to it, brick by brick. There was a long silence. Then she whispered, "You should have written." "I did," he said, his voice cracking. "So many times. I just never sent them. I didn't know where you were. I was too ashamed." Her lips trembled. "Then write one now," she said. "But this time not to me. To them." He looked at her. "You want me to?" "Yes," she said firmly. "Write them a letter. Tell them what you would have said if you'd stayed. If you had been there. No promises. No apologies. Just truth." Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. He nodded. The next morning he returned. Not with his usual quiet presence, but with an envelope. Handwritten. No name on the outside. He left it on the gatepost and walked away. That evening, when the children were asleep, Eunji sat by the fire, holding the letter in trembling hands. She considered reading it herself, but she didn't. She placed it gently in the drawer beside their bed. One day, she thought, one day they'll be ready. But that day was not yet here. The following afternoon, something unexpected happened. As Daniel sat outside the fence, as he had every day, Jisoo walked up to him. Not all the way, just close enough that he could be heard. "Do you like bugs?" the boy asked suddenly. Daniel blinked. Some. Not the scary ones." Jisoo held up a jar with a beetle inside. "This one's not scary. He's strong. His name is King Boots." Daniel smiled, heart trembling. "King Boots," he repeated. "That's a good name." Jisoo looked thoughtful. "You can look at him, but don't let him out." Daniel nodded. "Of course." Jisoo handed over the jar through a gap in the fence, then ran off without another word. Daniel held the jar gently in his hands, watching the tiny beetle crawl along the glass. Jisoo had spoken to him. Just a few words, but they echoed louder than any speech he'd heard in years. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't trust. But it was something. A crack in the wall. Daniel reached for his notebook. His fingers trembled slightly as he flipped through the pages, stopping on the last sketch. A simple image of the jar in his hand, Jisoo's tiny fingers barely visible letting it go through the fence. A bridge. He sat there for hours, pen in hand, not drawing this time, but writing. Not for the children, not for Eunji, but for himself. A confession only the night would hear. In the morning, the village stirred gently awake. Roosters called out. Women swept porches. Smoke rose from chimneys. Daniel washed his face in cold water and stepped outside, heart pounding with nervous hope. He returned to the fence, just like every day. But something was different. This time, all three children were already waiting. Miho stood with his arms crossed, serious as ever. Hannah held a small purple flower behind her back. Jisoo still had King Boots, the jar clutched protectively in both hands. Daniel slowed, unsure what to say. He didn't want to ruin it. Whatever this was. Miho spoke first. "Did you really draw us?" Daniel blinked. "Yes. Would you like to see?" The boy nodded. Carefully, Daniel pulled the notebook from his bag and held it out over the fence. Miho took it cautiously, opening to the page where the three of them sat under the plum tree. "That's me," Jisoo said, pointing. Hannah leaned closer, her head against her brother's shoulder. "You made my hair too neat." Daniel chuckled, and it slipped out of him before he could hide it. That sound, genuine and soft, surprised even him. "I'll fix that next time," he said. There was a beat of silence. Then Hannah looked up. "Can you draw mommy too?" Daniel froze. He glanced toward the cottage. Eunji stood in the doorway, arms folded, listening. "I did," he said quietly. "But only once." "Why only once?" Hannah asked. "Because I didn't think I deserved to keep seeing her face." The children were silent, too young to fully grasp the weight of his answer, but old enough to feel its sadness. Eunji walked down the path then, her steps slow, deliberate. "Let's go inside," she said to the children. "Lunch is almost ready." As they turned to go, Jisoo paused and handed the jar back to Daniel. You can keep him, King Boots, but don't let him out. Daniel stared at the jar like it was a sacred object. Thank you, he whispered. Jisu grinned and ran after his siblings. Eun-ji lingered. Daniel met her eyes. They're incredible, he said. You raised them to be brave. She nodded once. They didn't have a choice. He hesitated. I'd like to come back tomorrow, if it's still okay. She sighed, glancing back at the children through the window. Come, she said, but don't expect more than this. They're letting you in on their terms. And if you break that, I won't, he said quickly. I swear. Her gaze lingered on him, uncertain. Don't make promises with your mouth that your heart can't keep, she said. I'm not who I was, he replied. Then show me, she said. Not today, not tomorrow, but slowly, quietly. Then she turned and walked away, and Daniel stood at the fence, the jar in his hands, the breeze brushing his hair. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing the world. Jisu brought pebbles shaped like hearts. Miho started telling him about dinosaurs. Hannah would leave flowers on the fence post, never saying a word as she dropped them there and skipped away. Daniel treasured every moment, every glance, every accidental smile, but nothing prepared him for what would come next. It was early evening, and golden light spilled across the yard. Daniel sat on the old bench outside the fence with his sketchbook, drawing the children under the plum tree again. This time together, their heads leaned in, whispering secrets. Then Miho's voice called out, louder than usual. Mom, Hannah's bleeding. Daniel shot up to his feet, the sketchbook slipping to the ground. Inside the yard, Hannah had tripped running across the garden path and was now curled up near the base of the tree, holding her knee, tears silently streaming down her face. Eun-ji appeared at the door, but Daniel was already moving. His instincts overpowered everything. He forgot about fences, forgot about promises. His feet carried him through the gate before his mind could catch up. Hannah, he called, breathless. Let me see. He dropped to his knees beside her. She looked up, startled. His hands reached for her knee but hesitated, gentle, unsure. Can I? He asked softly. She nodded, lip trembling. He lifted her pant leg carefully. A shallow cut, red and raw, with a bit of gravel stuck in the skin. Eun-ji arrived seconds later, but froze when she saw him there, kneeling beside their daughter. She didn't speak. Daniel pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and gently dabbed the blood away. His hands trembled, but he was steady, tender. It's not too bad, he whispered. But it stings, huh? Hannah nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Daniel gave her a small smile. You're braver than I ever was. Really? She asked, sniffling. He chuckled softly. I once cried for an hour over a splinter. Miho and Jisu hovered nearby, wide-eyed. They had never seen him this close. Never seen him look like someone real. Someone human. Eun-ji finally stepped forward, a damp cloth and ointment in her hands. I'll take it from here, she said quietly. Daniel stood slowly, backing away without argument. Of course. She sat down where he had been, gently tending to Hannah's knee. But her hands lingered just a second longer than needed. Her eyes met his once, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them. After a few minutes, Hannah reached for Daniel's hand as he stood by the gate. Will you come tomorrow too? She asked, her voice small. His eyes welled instantly. If it's okay with your mom. Eun-ji's expression shifted, subtle, uncertain, but not cold. It's okay, she said. He knelt again, this time not to tend, but to speak gently. I'll be here, he said. Every day if you want me to. Hannah smiled. I do. That night, Daniel returned to the inn with a heart so full it hurt. He sat by the window for hours, staring at the sky, thinking of her hand in his, small, trusting. But peace didn't last long. 3 days later, he arrived at the gate to find the cottage strangely still. The yard was empty. No laughter, no running feet. His stomach dropped. He stepped closer, worry spreading fast. Then Eun-ji appeared on the porch, pale and shaken. Her eyes locked on his. Something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, voice tight. "It's Miho," she said. "He collapsed this morning." Daniel's world stopped. "What? Where is he?" "We're going to the clinic in town. The one with the better pediatric unit. They said he might need imaging. He's been dizzy. His fever shot up overnight." Daniel moved to her side. "I'm coming with you." Eunji hesitated, eyes filled with fear and exhaustion. She didn't argue. They drove in silence, the children in the back seat. Hannah holding Jisu's hand, both of them too quiet. At the clinic, Miho was taken in immediately. Daniel sat beside Eunji in the waiting room, his leg bouncing, fingers clenched. The sterile air made him feel like he was drowning. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked, voice tight. She turned to him, eyes shining. "I didn't think you'd come. I would have run," he whispered, barefoot, through a storm. They both looked up when the doctor finally stepped into the hallway. "He's stable," the doctor said. "We're running tests. Could be a viral infection, but we're ruling out more serious possibilities." Daniel's knees nearly gave out. Later, when they were allowed to see him, Daniel entered the small room first. Miho lay on the bed, eyes heavy, cheeks flushed. "Hey, buddy," Daniel said gently, sitting beside him. "You scared us today." Miho's voice was barely audible. "Are you gonna go away again?" Daniel blinked, the question stabbing deeper than any accusation. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." Miho turned his head slightly, resting it closer to his arm. "Good," he whispered. Daniel sat in the corner, elbows on his knees, staring at the boy's chest rising and falling under the thin blanket. He hadn't moved in hours, afraid that if he blinked too long, something would change. Eunji stood near the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She hadn't spoken much since the doctor left hours ago. Her eyes were fixed outside, but she wasn't seeing the streetlights or the dark silhouettes of trees beyond. She was far away, in some quiet place where only mothers go when fear takes root in the bones. Daniel finally broke the silence. "I didn't know how small he really was until I saw him like this." She didn't answer. "I've watched him run around, jump, climb trees like he owns the sky, and now he's just lying there, like the light's gone out." She turned, slowly, her face pale but composed. "That's what it's like being a parent. Every fever feels like the edge of a cliff, and you stand there, praying you don't fall." He nodded, eyes locked on the boy. "I don't know how you did it alone." Eunji's voice was quiet, but sharp. "I didn't have a choice." "I know," he said. There was a pause. Then she walked to the side of the bed and brushed Miho's damp hair from his forehead. "He used to wake up crying. At night when he was 2, she said. Night terrors. I'd have to hold him and whisper the same thing over and over until he fell asleep again." Daniel swallowed hard. "What did you say?" "I'd tell him, 'It's okay. I'm right here. I'll never leave.'" Her voice cracked on the last word. Daniel stood up slowly and moved closer, but he didn't touch her. He didn't dare. "I wish I could go back," he said. "I'd burn every plane ticket. I'd forget every country. I'd give everything to be there for even one of those nights." She turned to him, eyes wet but furious. "But you weren't. And now he's lying here asking if you'll leave again." "I won't," he said, stepping closer. "I swear to you, Eunji, I'm not going anywhere." She shook her head. "You can't just say that now, after the damage is done. You left, Daniel. You left me carrying 3 lives inside me, with no money, no support, no voice. I had to lie to our children just to give them something to believe in." His voice broke. "What did you tell them?" "I told them you were a traveler, that you went away to help people, that you were brave." Daniel looked down, ashamed. "I don't deserve that." "No," she said bitterly. "You don't. But they deserved a story that wouldn't break their hearts." He covered his face with his hands, the weight of her words crashing down on him like a wave. "I wish I could fix it," he whispered, "but I don't even know where to start." There was a long silence between them, filled only by Miho's slow breathing and the soft beep of the heart monitor. Then, from the bed, a small voice. "Mom?" Eunji turned immediately and sat beside him. "I'm here, baby." Miho's eyes blinked open, dazed. "I dreamed. You were gone." She took his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "Never. I'm right here." His eyes shifted, landing on Daniel. "And him." Daniel stepped forward slowly, afraid to break the moment. "I'm here too, Miho." The boy's voice was barely audible. "Are you gonna leave again?" Daniel dropped to his knees beside the bed. "No, not ever again." Miho studied his face for a long moment. Then he whispered, "Good, 'cause I don't want to have to forget you again." Daniel's breath caught. He reached out and gently took Miho's other hand, his fingers trembling. "You don't have to forget me. Not anymore." Miho gave the smallest nod before his eyelids drooped closed again, his grip still tight around Daniel's hand. Eunji watched them quietly, her expression unreadable. Later that night, when Miho had fallen back into a peaceful sleep, Daniel sat outside the clinic on the steps, staring up at the sky. Eunji joined him, sitting beside him without a word. After a while, she said, "I don't know if I'll ever trust you again." "Not completely." He nodded. "I don't expect you to. But they're starting to," she added. He turned to her, eyes filled with something close to wonder. "Do you think there's still space for me?" "Not with you. I mean with them." She looked up at the stars, arms wrapped around her knees. "I think, if you're patient, they'll give you that space. But it's not something you're owed. It's something you build, brick by brick." Daniel nodded slowly. Daniel hadn't moved from his chair all night. His hand was still loosely wrapped around Miho's, as if letting go might undo everything that had been rebuilt in the fragile hours before dawn. He watched the boy sleep and tried to swallow the ache inside him. A kind of grief that wasn't just about what happened, but everything that could have happened. The kind of grief you feel when you realize how close you came to losing something you hadn't even earned back yet. Eunji entered quietly, carrying a tray with warm porridge and tea. She set it on the table without a word, her gaze lingering on the two of them, on the way Miho's fingers still curled around Daniel's. "I told the nurse you were here all night," she said softly. "They said you didn't leave the room." Daniel nodded. "I couldn't. I was afraid if I did, he'd wake up and think I left again." Eunji sighed. Her voice was tired, but not cold. "He's going to be okay. The doctor said it was a virus. The dizziness, the fever, they've seen it before in children. He just needs rest." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, his body relaxing slightly for the first time in 24 hours. She sat across from him, wrapping her hands around the teacup. Silence stretched between them again. Not tense, just full. He finally spoke. "There was a moment last night," he cleared his throat, "when he asked if I would leave again. And I looked at him, and I saw me. I saw a boy who used to ask that question all the time. Only I never had the courage to say it out loud." Eunji tilted her head slightly, watching him. "You mean your father?" Daniel gave a small, bitter smile. "He left in a different way. He was always there, but never present. He used silence like a weapon, used disappointment like air." She lowered her gaze. "You never told me that. I didn't know how. I was afraid it would make me sound weak, like I was broken." Her voice was quiet. "You were." He didn't argue. She looked up again. "But that doesn't mean you have to stay that way." He exhaled slowly. "You know the worst part? I left you for freedom. I told myself I was choosing a life without limits. But all I did was run straight into my father's shadow. I became exactly what I hated." Eunji's eyes glistened. She reached for the cup again, but her fingers were trembling slightly. "You know what I hated the most?" she asked. He looked at her. "That I waited. For months. Every time a car passed on our street, I thought, maybe it's you. Maybe you changed your mind. And when I found out I was pregnant, I still waited, even though everything in me told me not to." Daniel's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "You don't get to apologize for everything with 2 words. You left an ocean between us. You disappeared. I didn't know how to come back, he said, his voice hoarse. And by the time I did, I was terrified I'd destroyed everything. She wiped at a tear with the back of her hand and looked toward Miho, who was starting to stir. He blinked at them sleepily. Mom? Eun-ji leaned in, her hand brushing his hair. I'm here, sweetheart. His eyes turned to Daniel. You're still here too. Daniel smiled, trying to steady the emotion threatening to rise again. Told you I'd stay. Miho blinked. Can we go home today? Soon, Eun-ji said gently. Doctor wants to keep you a little longer, just to be safe. Miho made a face. Hospitals are boring. Daniel laughed, and so did Eun-ji softly. You've got no idea, he said. Try staying in one as an adult. They don't even give you dinosaur stickers. Miho grinned sleepily. Can I have pancakes when we get home? Eun-ji raised her brows. Pancakes, huh? With chocolate chips, Miho added. She smiled. We'll see what we can do. Miho's eyes fluttered shut again, already drifting back to sleep. Daniel leaned back in his chair, watching the boy settle. I missed so much, he whispered. Eun-ji didn't respond for a long time, but when she finally did, her voice was quiet, thoughtful. You missed the worst of it, she said. The long nights, the fear, the loneliness, but also the magic. The first time he said, Mama, the way Jisoo sings to plants, the way Hannah talks to butterflies. You missed the small miracles. I know, he said, and I'll never forgive myself for that. She looked at him. Then don't waste the time you've got left. Daniel nodded slowly. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the town beyond. His fingers brushed against the frame as if grounding himself there, in that moment. I want to be their father, he said softly. Not a ghost, not a story, but someone real. Eun-ji stood too, slowly, arms wrapped around herself. That's not something you declare, Daniel. It's something you prove. Eun-ji followed a few steps behind, watching the two of them with cautious eyes. She hadn't said much in the car ride back to the village. She didn't need to. The weight of everything unspoken filled the space between them. Back at the cottage, the children greeted their brother like a returning hero. Jisoo had made a messy welcome banner with glitter that still clung to every surface. Hannah had saved him the biggest cookie from a batch Eun-ji had baked earlier that morning. And for the first time since Daniel had come back, the house didn't feel split in two. That afternoon, the five of them sat in the garden. Miho leaned into his mother's side, still tired but glowing. Jisoo played with a handful of stones, arranging them in a strange little circle. Hannah was braiding grass again, humming softly, and Daniel, he sat on the ground cross-legged, sketchbook open, drawing them all just as they were. It should have been peaceful, but peace, for Daniel, was now a delicate thing, something he held gently, afraid to grip too tightly for fear it would disappear. When Eun-ji rose to go inside, Daniel followed. Inside the kitchen, she stood at the sink rinsing dishes. The late light hit her hair, making it glow like something out of memory. For a moment, he didn't speak. He just watched her, overwhelmed with a quiet gratitude he didn't know how to express. Then he said it. I want to be part of their days, their mornings, their nights. Eun-ji didn't turn. You already are. He stepped closer. No, fully. Now she turned. Her eyes searched his face. What are you asking me, Daniel? He looked at her, not blinking. Let me be part of their lives, not just in the garden, not just at the fence. I want to help with school, with bedtime. I want to be the one Jisoo runs to when he's scared of thunder, not just a face at the window. She folded her arms slowly. You think this happens in a day? No, he said. I know it takes time, but I don't want to wait behind the gate anymore. I want to stand inside. Eun-ji sighed and leaned against the table. They're opening up to you, she said, but they don't really know what you leaving meant, what it cost. That will come later. Daniel nodded slowly. I'm not asking to erase the past. I just want to help build what comes next. Her voice dropped to a near whisper. What happens if you fall again? If you panic? I won't, he said quickly, but she raised her brows, unconvinced. He looked down. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. He set it on the table between them. What is that? A letter, he said. I've been writing it since the day I met them. Every night, page at a time. Everything I never said. For them. He nodded. But you read it first. You decide if they ever do. Eun-ji stared at the envelope, her expression unreadable. Why now? She asked. He looked at her, his voice low. Because I don't want to carry anything hidden anymore. Not from you. Not from them. I want them to know who I was, and who I want to be. She touched the envelope with careful fingers. You're asking for a lot. I'm asking for a chance, he said softly. Not to be perfect, just to show up. Every single day. She looked at him, long and hard. Then, for the first time, she didn't say no. That night, after the children were asleep, Eun-ji sat by the fire. The cottage was quiet. The crickets sang outside. The house smelled of mint tea and old wood. She opened the envelope. The letter wasn't polished. It wasn't poetic. It was raw, scribbled, parts crossed out. But it was honest. He had written about the day he left, the numbness he carried on the plane, the way he felt more lost in Rome, in Marrakesh, in Tokyo, than he'd ever felt in their tiny apartment in Seoul. He wrote about the silence that grew louder the farther he ran. He wrote about the regret that followed him like a shadow, how no sunset in the world was beautiful when he watched it alone. He ended with a single sentence. I never stopped loving you, but now I understand love means staying, even when it's hard. When she finished, her hands were shaking. She didn't cry. She just sat there, staring into the fire. Outside, Daniel stood near the plum tree, not watching, just waiting. Daniel was sitting at the table beside Miho, cutting pieces of toast into small dinosaur shapes. He wasn't watching from the fence. He wasn't waiting outside. He was there inside. Eun-ji moved around the kitchen in quiet rhythm. She didn't smile, but she didn't stop him either. And that, for now, was enough. Dad! Jisoo blurted out suddenly. Daniel froze. It wasn't said with hesitation, just curiosity. Like the boy had tried the word on for the first time to see how it fit. Daniel slowly turned his head. Yeah. Jisoo tilted his head. Are you gonna be at school day? School's on break. Miho muttered, mouth full of toast. I mean, when we go back, Jisoo said, looking at Daniel again. Will you be there? Daniel's throat tightened. If you want me to be. I do, Jisoo said, because other kids talk about their dads all the time. And I always pretended I had one. But now I do, right? Daniel looked at Eun-ji. She paused, her hand on the kettle, eyes locked on him, waiting. He turned back to Jisoo, swallowing hard. Yeah, you do. Hannah slipped her small hand into his under the table. It was the kind of gesture that said everything she hadn't dared say aloud yet. A silent me too. Later that afternoon, the rhythm of life continued, Daniel helping Miho fix the broken drawer in their toy chest, reading a story aloud while Hannah brushed her doll's hair, Jisoo humming and drawing lopsided trees. But all of it shattered when the phone rang. Eun-ji answered it in the next room. She was gone for less than a minute. When she came back, her face was pale. They know, she said. Daniel looked up, confused. Who? The press. He stood, his pulse spiking. How? She shook her head. Does it matter? He ran a hand through his hair. What did they say? They're coming, she said. They want a story, an angle, a photo. They think you've been hiding a family, that you've got an illegitimate child scandal. Daniel stared at her. That's not true. I didn't even know. They don't care what's true, she snapped, voice sharp and trembling. They care what sells. The children had stopped playing. Hannah clung to Miho's sleeve. Jisoo looked up with wide, confused eyes. Why are you yelling? He asked. Eun-ji inhaled sharply and knelt beside them. Sweethearts, everything is fine. We may have to be careful for a while. Okay? Daniel stood in the corner of the room, guilt and fury surging through him. "I'll fix this," he said. Eun-ji stood too. "No, you'll protect them. There's no fixing what's about to come." He stepped toward her. "Then let me stand beside you when it does." She didn't respond. The next morning, the press arrived. Cameras, flashing lights, questions thrown over one another like thunder. "Mr. Kim, who are the children? Are you married? Divorced? Is this your secret family? Why now? Why did you come back?" Daniel stepped outside the gate alone. He raised his hands. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. "They're my children," he said. "And they're not a secret. They're my pride, my deepest regret, and my greatest hope. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect them, even if that means standing between them and the world I created." Eun-ji stood inside the cottage, watching from the window. Her heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't hear every word, but she saw it. She saw him, not the man who left her, not the ghost who stood behind a fence, but someone new, someone learning how to stay even under fire. Daniel returned after the reporters were escorted away. The children ran to him, anxious, scared. He knelt down, pulling all three of them into his arms. "No one's going to take you away," he whispered. "Not ever." And when he looked up at Eun-ji, standing at the door, she didn't look away. Behind him, Eun-ji was silent, seated on the edge of the couch, her hands resting in her lap. Her fingers trembled slightly, either from exhaustion or the residue of fear, maybe both. Daniel finally turned toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've never been so scared." She didn't answer right away. "They didn't just take photos," she said, her voice quiet but tense. "They watched them. They pointed at their faces and turned them into headlines." Daniel walked closer, lowering himself to the armchair across from her. "I wanted to stop it. I tried." "I know," she interrupted, then looked down. "It's not about what you did. It's about what you didn't do. Years ago," he exhaled, heavy with guilt, "I made this world, one where cameras follow me, where gossip has more power than truth. And now it's reached them." Eun-ji's voice softened, but her words still stung. "And I've been protecting them from it their entire lives." He lowered his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I keep saying that, but it feels like it's never enough." She looked at him then, and something in her gaze cracked. Not forgiveness, not yet, but weariness. Deep, bone-deep weariness. "I don't need another apology," she said. "What I need is to know that this isn't temporary, that you're not going to fade away again the moment it gets hard." Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice was raw. "I've never been more certain of anything. I stayed when it was terrifying. I stayed when Miho collapsed. I stood in front of those cameras not to protect me, but to protect them. And you, I've never fought for anything the way I'm fighting for this." Her eyes flickered. "I believe you want to stay," she said, "but staying means confronting everything you've buried. Not just the mistakes you made with me or the children, but everything that shaped you." He looked away for a moment, then back at her. "My father," he said. The name hung in the air like something toxic. "He taught me how to." Daniel stepped in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His hair was tousled, his face still marked with fatigue. She didn't look at him. "You stayed with them all night," she said. He nodded. "I couldn't leave." She flipped a pancake and let the silence hang between them before speaking again. "You didn't just stay. You listened. You told them the truth." "I'm done hiding," he said softly. "From them. From you. From myself." She finally looked at him, her eyes tired but open. "Then you need to hear something." He waited. She turned off the stove, set the spatula down, and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "There's a part of me that still wants to hate you," she said. "Not out of anger, out of fear, because the day you walked out, something inside me cracked, and I've been holding it together with thread and willpower ever since." Daniel lowered his gaze. "You have every right to feel that. But last night," she continued, her voice trembling, I saw you kneeling by their bed, holding them like they were your whole world. And for the first time, I let myself wonder if maybe, just maybe, you could be what they need. His breath caught. I want to be. I swear it. Her eyes flickered. Then you need to know it's not about grand gestures. It's not about promises or speeches or letters. It's the small things. Brushing their hair, packing their lunches, sitting through school plays. It's the boring parts, Daniel. He stepped closer, his voice low. Those are the parts one want. More than anything. She nodded slowly, as if she needed to believe that, not just hear it. And you need to know, she said, that I don't want them to grow up loving a version of you that only exists when it's convenient. I want them to know the real you, flaws and all, because they will see your cracks. And when they do, you can't run. I won't, he said, with more certainty than he'd ever had. Her arms lowered. Then start with today. He blinked. Today. The spring festival in town, she said, turning back to the pancakes. They've been looking forward to it all week. Crafts, food, games, and a puppet show at sunset. I told them you'd probably be too busy. He stepped closer, hopeful. I'm not. I'll be there. Good, she said without smiling, but her voice softened. Because they'll be watching. All day. Not to see if you show up, but if you stay. That afternoon, the village square burst with life. Colorful paper lanterns hung between trees. Children ran barefoot across the grass. Music floated on the air like something from a simpler time. Daniel held Hannah's hand as they walked, her tiny fingers clinging to his. Jisoo raced ahead, chasing bubbles. Miho stayed close, his eyes scanning every booth like he wanted to remember it all. Eunji walked beside them, not touching Daniel, not smiling like the others, but she was there, and that somehow felt like a hand in his. They painted kites. They tasted sweet rice cakes. Daniel lost to Miho in a beanbag toss and carried Jisoo on his shoulders through a maze of fabric tunnels. At sunset, they all gathered on the grass, waiting for the puppet show. Daniel sat cross-legged, Hannah curled in his lap, her cheek pressed to his chest. Jisoo leaned against Eunji's shoulder, already half asleep. Miho sat between them, his expression quiet and thoughtful. The sky turned gold and lavender. Eunji looked at Daniel. They're happy. He met her eyes. Because they're home. She hesitated. Then, in a voice barely louder than the wind, she said, So am I. Daniel didn't reply. He didn't need to. Eunji sat on the back steps, wrapped in her old shawl. The sky stretched above her, stars blinking into view like promises. The moonlight shimmered over the edges of the plum tree, and the scent of warm earth and fading festival lights still clung to the wind. Daniel stepped out gently, closing the door behind him. He held 2 mugs in his hands, the steam curling upward like a thread between them. She didn't look at him, but he sat beside her anyway. He offered her a mug. She took it. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then she broke the silence. They called you Appa today. He looked at her, his heart full. I know. She finally turned to him. How did it feel? He took a breath before answering, like the word itself needed space to be honored. Like something I didn't know I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. She looked down into her tea. They don't understand everything yet, but they're beginning to believe. And belief in a father is fragile. I won't break it, he said. You might, she replied, gently but honestly. Not because you mean to, but because life is unpredictable. Because you're human. Because love sometimes fails. Daniel turned toward her, voice soft but unwavering. Then when it does, I'll stay and fix it, no matter how long it takes. A quiet passed between them, filled only by the distant hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves. She placed her mug down beside her. I never stopped loving you, she said, not looking at him. But I stopped trusting that love would be enough. His breath caught in his throat. She continued, It took years to rebuild myself, to stand on my own. I didn't do it so someone could come back and rescue me. I did it so I'd never need rescuing again. Daniel nodded slowly. You don't need saving. But maybe you can choose someone to stand beside you anyway. She looked at him now. Her eyes held so much history, so much softness carved through fire. And if I let you stand beside me, I'm not just choosing for myself, she said. I'm choosing for them too. I know, he said. Unji stood, walking to the edge of the garden. The moon lit her profile, painting her in silver. She crossed her arms, breathing in the night. Tomorrow, she said, I'll tell them the whole truth, not just about why you left, but about why I stayed. Daniel walked to her slowly, standing just behind her. Do you want me there when you do? He